social media companies, meanwhile, being urged... I mean, it's, you know, how long do we have to urge them to do more to tackle online racism after those 3 England players were targeted after the final on Sunday?
Well, let's cut to the detail here. Posts that infringe copyright can be taken down very quickly, but the same cannot always be said for abusive comments and messages.
Joining us to discuss this, organisational psychologist John Amici, Imran Ahmed, who is Chief Executive of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, and social media lawyer Yair Cohen, who has tracked down hundreds of online abusers. So, Yair, we heard earlier a representative from Kick It Out who said there is one particular post, and I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but to me, it's an act of violence online, and it's available and it's gone viral on Snapchat. And I cannot understand why it is able to be circulated. You know the procedure and the way for getting this stuff removed immediately. How come these posts aren't removed immediately?
Unfortunately, the police isn't very helpful in assisting internet users in removing those posts or identifying the people who have been posting them. At the same time, we have to be very careful with social media companies. We don't want them to have more censorship power. So the only way it is done at the moment is by communicating. We would communicate with social media companies. We will agree on a court order. We will go to court very, very quickly. We obtain a court order that says that the social media company is able and allowed to hand over the details of the users, and then we'll have those users' details. The post will be removed fairly quickly. So you got to act very swiftly here.
When you say that you have the power through a court order, which you can get very quickly, to enforce a social media platform to hand over the users' details, that sets a lot of people on the back foot because they think, well, how? They don't have their details because they're tweeting or whatever anonymously. So how do you actually track them down to their home address so the police can knock on the door and arrest them?
Right. The social media companies will have IP addresses, they will have linked accounts, they will have telephone numbers. In 99% of the cases, we are actually able to trace those people. Now, quite often, the people who post online abuse, particularly racial abuse, they use various accounts. They use different pseudonyms, and they pretend they are, there are all sorts of people, but it might be only one person doing this. And then we get all the information together. We use detective work, and we manage to actually track them down. We've had bankers, a police officer on one occasion. Those people who are doing this aren't necessarily the people you think might be doing this. They tend to be respectable, quite often members of society, people that you really, really wouldn't expect. So they are not as sophisticated as one might think.
And it's not as sophisticated as they might think. They think that they're safe. They think that they're anonymous. And listening to you talk today, in 99.9% of cases, they're not. They're traceable. And it's so interesting to hear your description of what these people are actually like once the mask is ripped off them. They're not necessarily Neanderthal yobs, which is how we sort of see them, because they're so stupid in what they post. They are, as you say, in many cases, professional, educated men and women.
Articulated, educated, professional people. You just wouldn't think that someone holds a position, is a community police officer or is a surgeon in a police force, will even consider doing something like this, but they do.
So they're risking their livelihoods, because once they're exposed and shamed, I mean, these are sackable offences, they're risking their livelihoods and they're risking their liberty.
We would often hand over the information to the police. Unfortunately, we are much quicker than the police. It could take the police sometimes 6 to 8 months to obtain disclosure from a company that is located in the United States. We can do this, in a matter of days. And then we hand over the information to the police, and the police will then go and prosecute, and we, in fact, put people in jail for posting abuse and trolling innocent internet users.
John Amici, what happened online after Sunday reveal to you, and is criminal action the right way to deal with this? Is more restrictive action by social media companies the right way to deal with this? Or are we dealing with something much bigger here?
So there is a requirement for us to manage compliance. There's a requirement for us to manage egregious misbehavior in society. That's what police justice systems, it's what regulation is for. But this isn't the full extent of our challenge. The full extent of our challenge is not just these few vociferous people saying terrible things. It is a chunk of society that believes this is not a representation of the world we live in, but it is a representation of the world we live in. It's a chunk of society who wants to point to alcohol or a sporting event as the nexus of racism, as opposed to it being a simple undercurrent. It is people, as Yair said, who imagine something really classist, actually, that racism lives only with those who do not have a formal education. It lives only with those who are less well off, when the truth is exactly the opposite, because power exacerbates the ability of discrimination to harm other people. We are as much damaged by the words of a minister who is condemning taking the knee as we are by the individual acts of racism of people at that stadium, for example.
Many of us urgently hope that in the coming weeks and months, we start seeing actual prosecutions, that these individuals that we're talking about are named and shamed and appear in court and are duly punished. Given that punishment is partly seen as a deterrent, do you think that when that starts to happen, and we pray God that it does happen, as and when that happens, do you think that may have some effect and start to reduce these dreadful postings, because people will see that they can lose their livelihood and they can lose their liberty if they send them?
It'll create an arms war where people will become more sophisticated about how they post. Even right now, much of the most toxic racism that I experience is couched in the most sophisticated language. There are entire websites that people can go to online now where they can learn how to say things that are truly reprehensible, but are said with words that sound sophisticated, so that social media platforms and indeed the police would have a hard time pinning it down. And so, to me, the sanctions is an important part of this. We must remove the egregious offenders who really wound and harm people. But if we really want to make a change, we need to start a process of educating our children. We need to start a process of educating our parents so that they understand that one of the biggest hoodwinks that's been perpetrated on our society is the idea that those who have little are most wounded by those who have less than them. That's not how it works. There is nothing to be gained by harming, by criticizing a player because of his blackness. It doesn't enhance the dignity of anybody, and yet we live in a world where politicians, powerful people, have created this toxic stew and fooled people into believing that this kind of narrative is acceptable in the name of nationalism and many other things.
Well, you know what, John? I mean, those players have shown more dignity and courage in this situation than I can possibly imagine many, many others are able to summon on a normal day. Imran Ahmed from the Centre for Countering Digital Hate is the answer, excuse me, is one of the answers to just get rid of anonymity online. Could it be as simple as that?
Look, I think anonymity goes towards it to some extent. What we have now is a situation where racism is a feature of our society, and we know that there are racists out there, that there are racist themes and ideas, and they bubble up in certain situations in a much more visible way. And it's when the opportunity is there. So the opportunity on social media platforms is really, you can get away with whatever you want there. And there are no consequences. You don't feel that there are criminal consequences. The platforms themselves are reluctant to take action. They won't even remove the accounts of people that are racist on their platforms. And so anonymity might go some way towards creating a sense of threat for people, but it's going to take much broader change. And really what it will take is for the platforms to actually follow through on the whole raft of solutions that they have suggested over the past 10 years. Because the first instance, for example, of someone being jailed for abusing a footballer racially online was 2012, when Fabrice Muamba collapsed on the pitch, and someone was prosecuted and jailed for grossly offensive, malicious communications towards the player. In February 2021, the platform said they'd remove anyone that was racist online. My team have been tracking the racism that we saw just 2 days ago. There haven't been that many accounts removed.
None at all.
We're about to put out some statistics specifically on that, but I can assure you it's fewer than 1 in 10 of the accounts that we not just identified, but reported.
Why do you think that is? Is it just intellectual sloppiness? Is it corporate laziness? What's the answer? Why are they being so inefficient at doing what is clearly necessary?
Well, because there's no incentive for them to do so. Look, at a very simple level, social media platforms benefit not just from being the place where you can be hateful. So if you are someone that has hate in your heart, you know that it's a safe space for you. It's a safe space for vicious racists. But also, it's the place where the debate happens over whether or not that racism is appalling. And all they benefit from is people watching their platforms. Because, look, 98% of the revenues of Facebook, for example, which owns Instagram, come from advertising. So every 3 posts that you scroll down, they can serve you another ad. Every moment of controversy actually draws you in and keeps you there. Every time people talk about something trending, some horrible racism trending on social media, people flood there to see what's going on, and they benefit from it. They profit from it.
What an accurate yet pessimistic analysis that is. It's socially tragic. I have to say one thing though, and I really take heart from the beginning of this interview with Yahya Cohen. Yahya, if you don't mind, I think this programme should send your contact details to Cressida Dix, who runs the Met, because I think the police need to talk to you, because you seem to have found the shortcut to finding and prosecuting these individuals.
Okay.
Are you happy for us to do that?
You know, we have offered the police, and we will be delighted to help. But let me just say one thing here. I will be very careful giving social media companies more power to ban accounts, because that will give them control, complete control over free speech. What we do need to do, I would like to go out of business tomorrow, and I tell you how we can do that. We should be making obtaining disclosure orders very, very easily for people. So they don't need a lawyer, they don't need a court. They just need perhaps to submit a form to some sort of judicial committee with a little bit of evidence, and that will allow them to have disclosure. I would like to see that happen.
I love your positivity. Thank you.
Thanks, all of you, very much. If you've been affected by the issues raised, you can find advice and support at itv.com/.